So Bibi Netanyahu took to the U.S. airwaves as he did, all in English, of course, in order to telegraph directly to you. He was actually asked, though, he's like, hey, are you ever going to take responsibility for what happened on October 7th? Let's take a listen.
I know you say the time for that will come after the war. Why won't you take responsibility now?
I've already addressed that many times. And I said this whole question will be addressed after the war.
Why
just
not
as people
now?
would ask, well, did people ask Franklin Roosevelt after Pearl Harbor that question? Did people ask George Bush after the surprise attack of November 11th? Look, it's a question that needs to be asked.
I think
and
those
these questions will
were
be
asked.
And I've said that one thing that is important is, and I've said we're going to answer all these questions, including me. I'm going to be asked tough questions. Right now, I think what we have to do is unite the country for one purpose alone, and that is to achieve victory. That's what I did. We formed a unity government where the country is united as never before, and I think that's what we have to pursue. And what the people expect me to do right now is two things. One, achieve this victory and bring the hostages back, and second, assure that Gaza never becomes
And
a
to
threat for
Israelis
Israel
who are
again.
disappointed that you still won't take responsibility, you say?
Well, I said that I'm going to answer all the questions that are required, including the questions of responsibility. There'll be enough time for that after the war. Let's focus on victory. That's my responsibility.
So this is an especially ironic comment, the 9/11 one. Would we have been better off if we did not immediately rally around the flag and instead asked George W. Bush, like, hey man, how exactly did this happen on your watch? You had a briefing on what was it, August 9th or something like that? Bin Laden determined to attack the United States. So what happened there? Wait, the FBI and the CIA were like screwing with each other and they just happened to miss, you know, these Saudi agents that were all across America. We even had the 20th hijacker in custody, and you had another guy who was involved in the World Trade Center bomb, or no, in the 2000 Millennium bombing, and he actually recognized Zacchaeus Moussaoui, but you didn't show him a photo until after 9/11. You could have prevented it. Or actually, the CIA had scans of their US visas and knew they were coming here, and nobody was able to put that together. Now, let me ask whether we would have been better off asking all those questions. We didn't find out any of the facts I just laid out. We probably didn't find out till what, 2005, 2006? Well, by that time, we're in the middle of a damn insurgency in Iraq. And, you know, even the FDR example, there is a lot of stuff that happened inside the State Department where America would have been very much better off if we had asked a lot of questions about, hey, who the hell was running the East Asia desk and decided to just cut Japan off on an oil embargo and not think about what the consequences of that were gonna be? So yeah, actually, you are better off in the immediate aftermath being like, yes, how exactly did this happen? Not only prevent it never happen again, but prevent us from using the war to, you know, different political purposes, as Bibi is doing, to actually address the core problem that the majority of us Israelis feel, you know, want the hostages back, and they want Hamas to pay a price. Those are totally legitimate. But Bibi's direct, like, long-term interests do not align with what they want. And at least for them, the Israelis, I'll give them this, they're smart enough where they understand that. They're much smarter than we were after 9/11, where we were just like, rah-rah, oh my God, George W. Bush threw out a pitch at Yankee Stadium.
And to the Israeli public's great credit on this particular question, they have not let him sweep these questions under the rug, because the answers are all obvious, and none of them are useful for Bibi. And we've talked about this before. One of the answers, or two of them. One is his attempt to take over the judiciary to stay out of jail, like that kind of the Israeli public sees that as part of the kind of a distraction that kind of weakened the country ahead of this. And secondly, empowering these settlers in the West Bank to just run roughshod over Palestinians over the last year, to kill 200 plus of them, clearing out entire neighborhoods, required the moving of a lot of military assets from the Negev Desert up to the West Bank. So that was a choice that was made. Netanyahu is also very hostile to the south of Israel, because that's, as we talked about right afterwards, a lot of lefties live down there. And so all of these different moves he made, along with allegedly having the most sophisticated intelligence apparatus in world history and missing it, all of those things combined to create an opening for Hamas that appears to have shocked Hamas as well as the Israeli defenses. Like they did not expect that they would be kind of rampaging for days. You know, I think this was as we understand what they're thinking, what this was a hit these military outposts, grab as many hostages as possible, and then go back to Gaza and then do a hostage exchange for Palestinian prisoners. But they overran the defenses so thoroughly that they just called an audible and kept going.
Well, congratulations to them. They're certainly very smart people who, of course, would never have anticipated that taking hostages of children and all that wouldn't invite a massive military response. Ryan, you did flag, however, there's some stuff going on inside of Israel that I want you to be able to break down for us. We can go and put this up there on the screen, guys, about Israeli civilian and human rights inside of the country right now and some acts of protest and others. Can you just tell us about some examples about what you're seeing?
Yeah, so the Knesset has passed legislation since October 7th that criminalizes effectively criticizing the war effort, criminalizes any support of anything that could be remotely understood to be support of Palestinians broadly, and even criminalizes particular news consumption, not just the Hamas kind of Telegraph.
Yeah, you
channel.
mentioned the Telegram channel.
That is like definitely going to get you arrested.
Interesting.
But you can't be on different WhatsApp groups that are sharing news from reporters in Gaza. There have been people that have been arrested for just sharing the kind of handles of, oh, here's some good people to follow on Instagram.
Sure.
Like that has gotten you arrested.
Wow.
This weekend, there were two Israeli leaders here in Washington, D.C. One is a Israeli Jewish labor leader. The other is the only female Palestinian member of the Knesset. They founded an organization called Standing Together, and they're kind of doing an American tour. I saw them over the weekend. They said one of the things their organization did right after October 7th is they set up a hotline for people who were either arrested or fired for making public comments that ran afoul of these new laws. And they are in the high thousands. This is not like a couple of cases here of a teacher, like, because you've seen some high profile cases of a teacher who got arrested for posting the names of Palestinian children who were killed in Gaza. Like, that's it. Not saying, maybe they even supported it. Like, they're just posting the names.
Wow.
But they said they're in the high thousands. There's a viral video that's gone around of a Palestinian woman who's an Israeli citizen.
Yes, I watched that.
You saw that. The cops show up and they're like, you are supporting terrorism. And she's like, and you can tell in her eyes that she did not, like, she knew she didn't even post anything. And they said on her WhatsApp status had said, basically, may God grant them courage and victory or something like that. And she's like, I was referring to Israel. I'm an Israeli citizen.
Yeah.
I'm rooting for, like, she's probably already taking a lot of flack in her own community. And you can just tell from her body language she's telling the truth. But you can also see in her eyes that she feels like she's on the precipice of getting sucked into the abyss of this system of which she may never emerge.
My question to you was going to be, so WhatsApp, for example, they brag about end-to-end encryption and all that. So how do the Israelis even have visibility into this? Is it like cooperation with Meta, the owner? No, of Facebook? I would. How does that work?
Well, if it's your WhatsApp status, it's public.
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of this is public, and a lot of these WhatsApp groups, they're public. You have, like a public, sort of like a public Facebook page.
Sure, yeah.
So I think, as far as we understand, if you're doing encrypted messages back and forth, you might be okay. But Pegasus might be able to get into your WhatsApp messages as well. Like, it's not, as far as we understand, Signal is stronger than Facebook because Facebook owns WhatsApp. Because of some of the backdoors that are available to WhatsApp. But in general, we're talking about just public stuff, like putting on. There was a case of somebody who said something like, "There is no God but God," was arrested and interrogated, and said, "My aunt just died." Like that had nothing to do with the war.
Right. Well,
they made the person produce.
Right? Yeah, there is no God, but I mean,
they made the person. They made the person produce the death certificate.
Wow.
And then when they produce an aunt's death certificate, they're like, okay, fine. But make sure you better not be grieving about anybody in Gaza. If we find out that you're grieving about anybody in Gaza, we're coming back.
That's pretty crazy. All right, so there's a lot of stuff going on inside of that. And you also, you guys wrote this up over at The Intercept. You can break this down. I know a lot of our viewers actually will be interested in this. The Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, has now mapped Jewish peace rallies with, quote, anti-Semitic attacks. So this is almost too much of a parody, but give us the details, Ryan.
This is the kind of the logical kind of endpoint of what you were seeing over the last several weeks of all of these different commentators posting images of 100, 200,000 people marching in London or New York City and saying, look at all of these anti-Semites. I fear for myself. But then the actual marches are saying we want a ceasefire in the war. Like it's not an anti-Semitic march.
Right.
It is an anti-Israel war march. And so it would make sense that then the Anti-Defamation League, which has been pushing for a long time to say that criticism of Israel is the same thing as anti-Semitism, for them to say, all right, if you attend one of these marches, that's a hate march, and you're anti-Semitic, and you're going on the list.
So even if you're Jewish, it's now anti-Semitic.
Especially.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Especially then, because that's more of a threat.
So they say, while the ADL told The Intercept it does not consider ceasefire protests anti-Semitic, just anti-Israel, its CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt, has now said otherwise. After thousands of Jews called for a ceasefire, ADL-DC released a statement equating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Greenblatt piled on, calling the groups that organized the protest Jewish Voice for Peace hate groups. Roughly 500 Jews, including 25 rabbis, were then arrested at that Capitol protest. It is important to note these are radical fringe Jewish organization, and being Jewish does not exempt an organization or a person from being anti-Semitic. So,
basically, imagine that ideology is in power in Israel.
Yes.
Like because here we can be like John Greenblatt going, doing his thing where he's calling
we can say whatever we want
criticism.
here. It could be annoying because you could subtweet it or something like that, lead to a boycott or something. But at the end of the day, like we're not going to go to jail for it.
But if in Israel you and I might be facing cops on the other side of the door, and you'd be like, no, it was him. he's a guy.
I wouldn't throw you under the bus. Don't worry. I've almost made.
They would review it. They'd be like, how did you respond when he said that thing?
Interesting. Well, they can roll the tape.
They
could go ahead and they could see how it is. So that was an important thing that we wanted to highlight for everybody. Just a couple of different fragments, I think, to tie a bow on this for inside of Israeli society. Like number one is that Netanyahu himself has a direct interest in drawing this thing out as long as possible. Two, that his coalition, the people who are in charge, actively are kind of pushing him to a position where he has to defend some of the most indefensible actions. And at the same time, it's like a détente between the two of them, because they're like, hey, Bibi, you get to stay in power, but you have to defend everything that we do. And otherwise, we won't be asking questions about October 7th. And the cover of all of that is the crackdown inside of Israeli society.
And underlying all this, for the people who haven't been following along, is he's been facing all of these corruption charges that he can get out of as long as he's in office.
Yes, that's
so
right.
The entire world is held hostage. I've wondered if they could just come up with a deal and be like, it's fine. We won't prosecute you and your wife for these corruption charges.
I have said this before. I genuinely think he's a villainous figure, no matter what. Especially if you support the state of Israel. I think the most patriotic thing you can do is if you're a controversial person, and we should look to British history for things like this. Chamberlain, like whenever he knew he was going to lose a vote of no confidence, he didn't want to leave. He was like, okay, I'm out. The public won't support me. Form a coalition government. I'm done. And a lot of people have had to make that choice in the past. It's brutal. It's not like history treated him all that well. He died of cancer very shortly afterwards, and he's probably, still considered.
He's Chamberlain.
He's like one of the worst PMs in British history, and yet he did the honorable thing at the time. There was I think it was H.H. Asquith. Same thing in the middle of World War I. He lost power, and he said, okay, I'm done. And he had to turn over power to somebody who he genuinely hated. That's how it goes sometimes whenever you're actually a patriot. Herbert Hoover, he certainly didn't want to turn things over to FDR, but he did. It's just one of those where people, if you really support the country, you should be able to put yourself past it. You should put the country above you and your own personal interests. And unfortunately, Netanyahu has chosen not to make that decision. I genuinely think it may be one of the worst things that's happened to Israel as a result of this, and has guided so many of their worst decisions, which will remain perilous, I think, in the many years to come that'll fall out.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.